We all know right now that there's a great international financial meltdown. So I wanted just to make one important distinction, is that many people are aware that we are all in for a very rough time, apparently, for a couple of years or maybe even longer. Some people say it's going to be much worse than we think. Some people say that's not true. We don't really know, but we're aware that we're all in for hard times. Now, I want to make an important distinction here. This is the distinction between the instinct or the impulse to survive and the instinct or the impulse to evolve. Now, human beings, as a species, we have been faced with threats to our survival ever since we stood up on two legs, way before we were human beings. So in other words, we've been faced with either a threat from nature in the form of a hurricane or a flood, or threats from each other, from warring tribes to the Germans. So we've been conditioned through, as a result of our history, to being in situations where our survival is threatened. And so right now, many people are feeling, my standard of living is going to change. Things won't remain the same. What am I going to do? What am I going to do? How am I going to protect myself? So this instinct, the instinct to survive, is nothing new. It's one that we've been very familiar with forever. But there's a different kind of instinct. There's a new instinct that is just beginning to emerge in the human race, in the human species, which is what Enlightened Next magazine is really all about. It's about really propagating this new instinct or this new impulse, and that's the impulse to evolve. Now, the impulse to evolve is different than the instinct to survive. The instinct to survive means you don't want things to change. I like things the way they are, so I don't want anything to change. But the instinct to evolve is very different. That means you want things to change. You're very interested in things changing for the better. But very specifically, that means you're looking at life in a vertical context. So in other words, evolution is you're going from the level of development that you are now to one that is higher than the place that you are now. Or if you want to look at it collectively, the place that we are culturally, we want to go to a place that's new, that's higher. Now, this is a very new impulse in the human species. Human beings we obviously have been evolving for 40,000 years, or ever since the beginning, really, of human civilization. If we obviously look historically, we are very different than we were 20,000 years ago, 10,000 years ago, 5,000 years ago, 2,000 years ago, 1,000 years ago, 500 years ago, 200 years ago even. So we are evolving. But this new impulse is one in which when the impulse to evolve, when the impulse to become more becomes conscious. So that means when the I sense, when you experience at the level of consciousness, or in the I sense, when you experience a bubbling up within your own being, within your own mind and heart and soul, when you experience a thrill, and when you experience the experience of a thrill of an aspiration to evolve. I want to evolve. I want to evolve. And especially if you begin to see that your own personal evolution is the evolution of our whole species. Because you remember, 14 billion years ago, nothing existed. Then suddenly there was a big burst. There was an explosion. And this is 14 billion years later, and the explosion is still happening. So what I'm really describing is really a state of consciousness and a perspective where that explosion is becoming aware of itself. In evolutionary enlightenment, the explosion that took place that was initiated, that began 14 billion years ago, is awakening to itself, is becoming aware of itself. And when the individual in the 21st century at the leading edge realizes this, recognizes this, and then takes responsibility for it, you begin to realize that it's really up to you to make this world a different place.